Thank you so much, Wade, for joining me on the Sami Parvez show. It is great to have you back after a few months.
Yeah, no, it was good. And now I get to be in my actual set,
Yeah,
not up against some random wall in a third suite I was renting in Abbotsford.
yeah. I remember, hopefully, looking forward to seeing you again, in coming weeks. So let's begin with BC politics. So right now, BC Conservative are trying to signing a petition in the BC Supreme Court, and also BC Conservative leader John Ruster called for a review, which is slamming down like the election process. It seems like they are calling it a rigged, or it was not fully transparent. So what's your take on all of it?
Well, they're not saying it's rigged. They're just saying there are irregularities in the election.
Mm,
And part of it was because of looser rules when it came to how the election was being done. The process being sort of loose allows for more irregularities to
mm,
happen.
yeah.
So their candidate, Hanvir Randawa, in the riding of Surrey Guildford, is bringing a petition to the court to overturn the results of his riding and hold a new by-election because his NDP opponent only won, Gary Begg, only won by 22 votes,
Yeah.
and they've already found 45 irregularities in the vote. And on top of that, 21 of those irregularities come from one specific lodge 80 meters across the street from a polling station, and that thing might as well it's called the Argyle Lodge, but it might as well be called the Fraud Lodge because everything about the way that they were sending in votes was completely wrong. One manager basically processing and writing up everyone's ballots for them or telling them how to vote. People at that lodge were mentally incapacitated and were not able to actually articulate how they would actually vote. Like they are not in a state of mind that would allow them to vote. They're nonverbal. They don't function well, and somehow they and every single other person in that lodge all sent in ballots, and the manager is a big NDP donor, somebody who literally maxed out a $1,400 donation in the year 2023, as well as gave a $459 donation to Jagmeet Singh's 2017 leadership bid for the federal NDP. Like, really sketchy there. But the funny thing about the conservatives asking for this inquiry into how the election was conducted and looking for other irregularities that occurred is that the NDP are trying to play this off like they're election deniers, they're just sore losers or whatever. The first person to say that there were problems with the election that needed fixing was Premier David Eby himself in November. He says, yes, it's unacceptable. It's taking this long to count ballots. We're finding ballot boxes that weren't counted. Ballots weren't being counted properly by the tabulators. We need to do a review of our processes. But Eby doesn't like that the conservatives want it to be an independent investigator looking into this rather than a newly elected BC MLA, BC NDP MLA, which feels slightly sketchy that you're going to investigate the election that you won yourself to see if maybe you actually didn't win based on all the irregularities that occurred in these extremely close ridings. And let's be clear, you don't need a lot of irregularities to throw off a very tight riding election. There are several candidates in this election who won by less than 100 votes. While yeah, it's probably uncommon to find like more than 100 irregularities in a single riding, still, in the ridings where somebody only won by 50 votes or 22 votes or 97 votes, maybe you should look into it. Even a candidate I helped in BC, Lawrence Mock, only won by 97 votes. And I think if we did a full review of any irregularities that happened in that riding, he'd still be the winner. But I would say that the NDP fully has the right to look around that riding and making sure nobody was doing mail-in ballot shenanigans, nobody was voting twice. That's also something that apparently happened in Surrey Guildford. Somebody accidentally gets double registered to vote, and then they can walk in with two pieces of paper, or walk in one go through,
Yeah.
wait a day, go and
Mhm.
vote again when the poll workers might not recognize you because BC elections happen to register your name as like it's like Wyatt Claypool, and then it registers me again as Wyatt Jackson Claypool, but I'm
Hmm.
two people with the same name effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is concerning. Yeah, the right word is irregularities. Like irregularities happen. What conservative, BC conservative is calling for it to be a review. So we know like there are like 47 seats for NDP and 44 for conservative and just two for Greens. But if we take a look, it was unexpected result for 50 years for the conservative as they are now forming a official opposition. But they were predicted it would be a tight, like 50-50 maybe they can form a government, but unfortunately it did not happen. So do you think like where we would we go, like there will be a full review of those votes, not just only those close races, like, but usually it happens the by election rules, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong. If it is the it mean uh if it is less than 1% uh, lead, so it will go automatically a recount. So
Yeah, so
was there a, yeah, please go ahead.
there was a recount, and there was also a judicial recount for Surrey Guildford, and I believe the other riding they also did one for was Kelowna Center.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant so not only was it just recounting the ballots, it was also, having lawyers present, party officials present, making sure as they're counting ballots, you have people putting more scrutiny on how people are marking the ballot. So there's not like one tick mark here and a one tick mark here, but it kind of looks like an X. You would just say, yeah, throw that ballot out. It's unclear. We're not counting it. And so
Mm-hmm.
ballots like ballots were found during that process. That's why EB even called for a review, because going into the recount, Gary Begg had a lead, I actually believe, of like 50 votes or might have been like 100 votes. And after the recount, it was then down to just 27 votes, but then they found another 5 votes that weren't counted the first time. And it wasn't like somebody pulled them out like of a backpack and threw them into the lot. It was like they were part of the stack, but the tabulator hadn't counted them. They were all conservative ballots. So it went from a 27-point lead to a 22-point lead. And you would assume that as you keep counting more ballots and recounting them, that the lead keeps shrinking, that maybe there's something systemic here that we need to look into on how the mistakes are being made. Not because someone's cheating. I don't think anyone cheats in this manner.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not worth it where you can go to prison just to try and give 50 votes for your guy when in most ridings, elections are not that tight. But you do have to make sure that people with access to easy ways of screwing with the vote, that you can crack down on that stuff, because it does add up over time, that if people are double voting or people are voting from outside the riding, like they have an old registration saying they live in this riding but they don't actually live there, they live somewhere else, but realize their vote's very effective in this riding and come and cast a ballot. That is a big problem, because right now this 22 vote riding is determining if the BC NDP has a majority government or a minority government. And a minority government turns actually not even into a minority government, because they'll still have to put up who the speaker is, and then they will then be tied with the conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would go from 47 seats for the NDP and 44 for the
Yes.
conservatives. It would
Yeah.
be 46 for the NDP, 45 for the conservatives, and then the NDP would have to drop another person for speaker, because the
Mm-hmm.
Greens are not putting somebody up as speaker, because you need 2 seats in
Yeah.
order to be an official party to get more funding in the legislature, and the Greens are not giving that up to then put someone in as speaker and have even less pull within the legislature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to go back, like you pointed out that a manager is working in election, so he donated to BCNDP also,
It is a
Jagmeet.
she. I actually said in my
She.
first video on the subject, I just assumed it's a guy because I'm bad with South Asian
Mhm.
names.
Okay, so she like donated, like BC Jagmeet Singh campaign in federal back in 2017 for leadership. Then now to BC and DP. So you said like she guided those people, like who were vulnerable people, like maybe they could not see, or they, like cast their own votes, but they
Many
helped
of
them.
those people have mental health problems from having recovered from like opioid addictions, or they have other limitations. And many of these people, when the Hanvir's people are going to Argyle Lodge and interviewing some of them, and some don't have the ability to speak anymore, they're nonverbal. They can still function, but they need that kind of assisted
Mhm,
living facility to operate in. When every single person, 100% of the household, is not just voting because it's across the street. They could have walked over and voted if they wanted to, but they all sent in mail-in ballots. That's weird. And then when they interviewed these people who could like articulate what had gone on, they were saying we didn't even know there was an election going on. We were basically rushed into marking the ballot how the manager wanted us to mark it.
mhm,
And here's the most frankly, and this shows that it's not just smoke here. I think it's fire here as well. The manager of the lodge told what is kind of a useless lie, but it demonstrates deeper dishonesty. So she said, one, she's like, oh, well, we just help them fill out their ballots. We let them mark it however they want, which is contradicted by multiple affidavits from Argyle. But she also said, I actually spoiled my ballot. I didn't actually vote for the BCNDP because obviously she's not going to say I voted conservative because that's
mhm,
so obviously not true when you donated 1,400 to the NDP. So she says, I spoiled my ballot. Like, really? You were one of the five people who spoiled their ballot in that riding? Because very few people go and show up and vote and end up spoiling a ballot. It's a very rare thing for people to do. That demonstrates she's just saying stuff. She is
mhm.
simply saying stuff to get you off her back. But in the same interview or in the same time that she was interviewed by the media, she then claims, well, we've been doing this for 30 years. I'm not sure that's the defense you want, that you've been committing fraud for 3 decades now.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, this is extremely surprising. So, so do you think will there be any consequences she could face, or other one, like whoever whoever are involved, like in this practice?
What, sorry, what do you say?
Like, do you think the date manager, like the one who helped like other, like just put to vote for PC and DP? So, do you think they would face any consequences?
I think they'd have to because this is an actual like defrauding of the BC voters in that riding to have had potentially the wrong MLA get selected by the riding to represent them simply because this person was pushing for votes to go in that were should have not naturally been sent in. And also too, we can't just assume that we should minus off 21 votes for the NDP because of this, because we don't know if any of these people, if they actually found out about the election and they wanted to vote, would have voted conservative. So we should almost be treating it automatically as 42 irregularities because we don't know how much plus or minus this would have been for the conservatives and the NDP. It could be anything from may have never made a difference. If all these people were just left to do things on their own, maybe they walk across the street and they vote themselves and they all vote NDP. But they could have also all gone across the street or mailed in a ballot and all voted conservative. And so that means it's a much bigger problem. Same thing with everyone who is voting, double voting or voting from outside the riding. We don't know if that's a plus or minus vote for the Conservatives or the NDP. So really, this is where the irregularities are requiring there to be a by-election. Because when you already have double the irregularities to the margin, now we really, without with confidence, cannot say who won.
Hmm. And how many seats are too close? Like less than 1% difference.
I would probably say about 5 to 7. There's Maple Ridge East, there's Kelowna Center, there's Kootenay Comox, there's this one, Surrey Guilford, the one that Zishan Walla ran in, also in Surrey. That one was very close. There was tons and tons and tons of close ridings here, some more than others. And again, many of these ridings were won by conservatives, and I think they should review them all because we cannot let small mistakes end up determining who ends up winning. And you can say, like, oh, well, it's just a small difference. Well, errors happen. Well, sure, but the closer the election gets, the more scrutinizing we should be of errors. If someone won by 1,200 votes, yeah, sure, I don't think it's people going around and mass mailing in ballots. That would be far too difficult to do.
Hmm.
Uh, but when it's like this, one person can literally spoil the entire election.
Yeah. So what like like BC conservative wants, like I know like they need a review, but after do they need like just several riding should be recalled for by election, or there should be a full like another BC election?
Not a full election. Again, most of the ridings, they voted how they're going to vote. And also when you do hold another election in ridings that already had one, that is now a very artificial election because you're going to have only certain people show up and vote because
Hmm.
some people are willing to vote once, but once you make them vote again in the next 4 months, they get a bit tired of it.
Yeah.
So you'd only do it in places where the vote was extremely tight and there is good evidence verified by a judge that the irregularities mount to more than double the actual margin. So, because of course, if there was 22 vote difference in this riding and they only found two irregularities, well, that's just how it goes.
Hmm.
But if you can find 45, if you can find 80, yeah, you kind of have to have another election because there is just a giant question mark on that result.
Hmm. Yeah, and how do you see like David EB's government? I think it will begin in March. The legislative assembly will resume in March or February.
Yeah, they're gonna be I think late February is when the government starts meeting. Might be March as
Hmm.
well. I think I might be confusing it with how the federal liberals are doing things.
Yeah.
Federal government's reconvening in
Hmm.
March or the parliament.
March
But yeah, I
27.
think on February 27th, that is the first day of the new legislative session in British Columbia. The problem is, even with it starting in February, the BC legislature doesn't really ever really get started in the sense that there are only 67 days this year that the
Hmm.
legislature is actually going to be in session, which is the least amount of days, I believe, outside of how some legislators met during World War II, because there wasn't that much domestic policy to go over. This also stifles the ability for the BC Conservatives to work because when there is an allocation of days that a legislature or the parliament is in session, your opposition gets days where they get to forward their own legislation, their own petitions, and whatnot. And when there's only 67 days, maybe the conservatives only have 15 days to do their own work in the legislature and put forward petitions. And it makes it very difficult to actually get attention on the issues you want to represent your constituents. While, yes, you can still do work for your constituents from your own riding's constituency office, even when legislatures out of session, it does make your schedule extremely cramped. It makes it very difficult to actually do all the stuff you want to do in the short periods of time you have. And basically, nobody can go on a vacation at all when the legislature's in session now because there is like if you miss a single day, you're dead.
Hmm. Yeah, and how do you see like Kevin Falker as the BC conservative leader? Is he
No,
going to?
John Rustad.
Yeah, pardon me, sir. John Rustard will lead the BC conservative in the next election.
I believe so. I think he performed admirably. He did a good job. I think he was a good steady hand for the party. I think you have to give the man credit when he's the first MLA through the door for the party, and then he was basically able to shoulder the burden for the election. I don't like the kind of backbiting that sometimes happens in parties. Not that I've heard it in BC, but people are like, well, he didn't win. He should step down. It's like, well, we wouldn't even come close if you were in charge. But now you suddenly want the leader's office because now you can smell the victory next time. And so I think that he didn't lose. He just failed to win, I guess would be a good way of putting it. We were this close, and you really can't blame a guy for coming that close when the expectations were so much lower, even just a week or two before the election.
Hmm. And should the credit be given to John Rustard for bringing up this like party on that rank? Like just became the official opposition, or just BC British Columbians were just sick of this BC NDP and BC liberals.
I think they were definitely sick of them. And because they were also sick of the BC Liberals slash United, that demonstrates that there was something unique that Rusted was doing too. Because if people just hated the government, they'd vote Liberal. They didn't want to vote Liberal because I think people realized that they actually wanted substantial change,
Mhm.
not just generic different party equals change kind of stuff that you often get. We need to get a new party in there, even though the parties are like identical on the issues. That honestly is how I see Ontario politics right now. Doug Ford, who's the other party leaders? I can always never remember them. Bonnie Crombie, Merritt Stiles, whoever the green guy is, I always
Mike,
forget his name.
I don't recall it.
Schreiner.
Yeah, yeah, Mike Schreiner.
All of them are just a different flavor of progressive big government party. The Doug Ford conservatives are a high tax, high spending, socially progressive, pro DEI party. And so it's not the same thing like the BC conservatives, who truly are a reform minded conservative movement.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So, what do you think? Like, how long this government would last after the throne speech?
I think if they do, if Surrey Guilford flips the other way, there's a by-election and Hanvir Mandawa then ends up becoming the MLA. I think this government doesn't last more than a year and a half. Right now, with the NDP at a bare majority, I think that I give them 3 years. I think the big weakness for the BC NDP, and I've heard this in the background, is many BC NDP MLAs hate David Eby's guts because he is a control freak. He thinks he is smarter than everybody else on the planet. And so a lot of MLAs and ministers, like this last election, don't really want to serve under him. He had like about 12 BC NDP MLAs suddenly retire, and not all of them for reasons of age. Many of them were actually fairly young, but the thing is that you can't do your job with David Eby around because he wants to do your job for you, but he wants you to do all the busy work. And so you end up just being an intern for David. And I think on a lot of these issues that the NDP are vulnerable on, like Soji, a lot of BC NDP MLAs might be willing to cross the floor and join the Conservatives because they know, one, they don't like working with David, and two, they're probably not going to win re-election anyways, with a conservative opponent probably running against them again with even more money, with more name recognition, and more momentum.
Hmm. Yeah, and so what do you think, like with respect to David Eby's leadership? Is he going to remain the leader of BCNDP until the next election, or he, in the midterm, just he's going to step away?
I think if there's a major economic slowdown in British Columbia again, and I think BC's basically been sitting on the verge of one for years now, that's when I think you see the leadership approval rating of EB completely collapse. And like Justin Trudeau, he kind of has to bow out. He's very much a Jeremy Corbyn-esque figure for the BC NDP. You know, John Horgan was like a almost blue collar NDP leader. He was like kind of like a guy that a plumber could vote for. Somebody who's a carpenter would vote for him. Anyone who works with their hands could, in theory, vote for John Horgan. David Eby is a metropolitan socialite ideologue NDP leader. And I think that he very much turns off a lot of the demographics who have historically voted NDP because it was the Workers' Party, and now it is the party for student union activists and environmental protesters. And so that's where I think that David Eby could end up getting cut off at the knees because he is not actually serving the traditional bases of the BC NDP, who are already very uncomfortable with his leadership style.
Hmm. Yeah, and just last point, so in terms of your own observation and analysis, did Conservative Party of Canada helped to boost BC Conservative at any point?
Not directly. Uh, Pierre Poilievre and many of the conservative MPs did not directly get involved with the BC Conservatives. They might have endorsed the local BC Conservative candidate, but they mostly stayed out of it just because of a policy of the Conservatives federally that they don't really try and pick winners and losers on the provincial level. But I think the main thing that helped the BC Conservatives was just the brand recognition with the federal party. Similar policies helped them kind of be identified together. And I think that Pierre Poilievre has proven in a certain sense that he actually does have coattails that pull along other people behind him into victories. And I think that's what we're also going to see on the federal level. I think we're going to see a lot of conservative federal MP candidates win ridings that
Mhm.
you usually wouldn't expect a conservative to win, just because there's going to be so much momentum behind Polyev as a political figure. Because you could say, well, it's the conservatives' momentum. I would say Polyev personally owns more than half of the momentum because we've seen the party run by Aaron O'Toole. We've seen it run by Andrew Scheer. We've even seen it run by Harper in 2015. The
Mhm.
Conservative Party does not own momentum. The
Yep.
Conservative Party loans momentum when they deserve it, and I think that Polyev has earned it for the 25 federal election.
Mhm. But in terms of the you are bringing up the federal politics, but don't you think it was just a luck for Pierre Pouliot? Like right now, like after 9 years, Canadians are sick with conservative. No, with liberal as they were sick with conservative in 2015, and they were
Yeah,
sick with liberal back in 2006. It means that the history defines itself, like what happened in the past, now it will happen in the future too. So
I agree.
yeah, go ahead.
That's a story that gets told a lot that governments just age out. Eventually, governments just get tired in the general public.
Hmm.
That's kind of true. But I think the 2015 election was very winnable for the conservatives, and 2006 was very winnable for the liberals too. That's why Harper only got a slim minority government back in 2006, and we required another election in 2008 and another election in 2011 before he
Hmm.
finally got his majority. The problem is, I actually think Polyev is just a flat out good leader. If he was the leader for the 2015 election, I think we win. But the conservatives ran just a tired, lackluster campaign. I thought that the way that Jenny Byrne ran the campaign for Harper, what it felt very like sluggish, like Harper's on his last legs. It was like the Conservative Party was campaigning against itself. They were running ads against Justin Trudeau, if you remember. It was the ads where it's like Justin Trudeau is just not ready. He's just not ready. And they would do these this kind of like job
Yeah.
interview esque
Mm.
advertisements.
Yeah.
And it's like, guys, can you be this stupid? Stop running ads that imply that your candidate or the other leader of the other party, the liberals, might be ready someday, but maybe just not today. It
Mm.
invites Canadians to disagree with the ad. It's very sluggish. The 2011 ads against Michael Ignatieff were brilliant. That he's not here for you, and he didn't come back for you because he came back from the U.S. to be the Liberal Party leader. And
Mhm.
the conservative narrative is that Ignatieff is an elitist loser who has come back to Canada. He's going to lose and he's going to go back to the US afterwards. There was no room for ambiguity about what the conservatives meant about him. Where in 2015 their messaging was ambiguous, their platform was very uninspired. They didn't have a big audacious policy they were running on,
Mhm.
and so then they hurt themselves. The thing with Trudeau was perfectly defeatable both in 2015, 2019, and 2021. But the big problem the conservatives have is they're not good at winning elections. They simply wait for the liberals to lose elections.
Mhm.
And that's sort of unfortunate for Polyev because I think any conservative leader would currently beat Trudeau. But I think Polyev would have actually been the man for the job in 2019 to beat Trudeau then and 2021. And now he's still the guy in 2025. But I think he's almost sold short by the fact that he doesn't truly get to defeat the Trudeau liberals because they defeated themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, sorry, I'm saying this is the last question, but
No worries.
like some ideas more are coming up. Just now, let's start on BC Liberals or BC United. So, is it done for them, or they will come back? Like maybe it back to conservative or NDP at any time in future.
No, because I can't think of a voter who cares about that party in the sense that I can't even create a voter in my mind who is so indecisive on what they want the direction of BC to be that they want the United Party back. That's why they ended up taking the dirt nap that they did this last year. It's because BC United perfectly triangulated itself into the party for absolutely nobody. You kind of want some reforms made, but you mostly want everything kept the same. But you don't like the way that David Eby is doing it, but really you think that he's still doing 80% of the right things and 20% just needs to be jiggled around. That's not how voters operate. Voters do not demand slight change. Voters either demand change or they want the same government in. That is the problem. That's also the problem for the federal NDP. Nobody thinks, well, if only the liberals were just a little bit more liberal, then I would vote for them, a little bit more left. So the NDP ends up again being the party positioned to capture none of the fleeing liberals because they want change, not slightly intensified liberal policy, which is what the federal NDP has come to represent under Jagmeet Singh.
Okay, thank you so much, Wait, once again, my friend, for joining me and sharing your great analysis. Looking forward to seeing you again, maybe in the upcoming weeks.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Sammy.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good one.